You're listening to the Arts Ed Podcast, Season 2, Episode number 15, Culturally Responsive Outreach in Arts Education. Welcome to the Arts Ed Podcast, conversations through the perspective of the arts and education, hosted by educators and artists Shauna Longo and Edric DeBose.
All right. Hey, everybody. Edric and I are back today to chat with you, and we're going to give a little disclaimer at the front of this. We both are coming off of some winter cold, so if we're coughing, we apologize. We're going to do our best to be really quick with our mute button, but I'm sure a cough or two may sneak in there, so our sincerest apologies at the front end of this. Yes, because winter has been rough on everyone.
It's dry coughs all over the schools.
Yeah, and they last for months. So anyways, today we thought we'd kind of dig into the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion and access conversation. Our previous two episodes we had on our friend Sanaz and Julian to kind of talk with us and hear very different perspectives, but yet there were so many things kind of in common between the two of them. So today we thought we'd kind of bring that together, those two conversations, and kind of break it down and summarize and kind of make some points that come out of both of their perspectives and really what it can mean within our schools.
For me, the thing that's always interesting is the difference between the institution and the idea and the initiative versus the individual, and then what motivates the individual to be involved with the work and how they go about doing it. So just talk about DEI really quickly. I want to start off with some of the common misunderstandings.
There are a lot of misunderstandings, by the way.
One of them is, one of the more obvious ones that gets a lot of airplay is that DEI promotes hate, right? So that, but the DEI is not there to promote hate, of course. It's really to bring people together, or that encourages hate against white people in particular. These are complicated conversations. There's a lot of history. It's like, but I go back to the thing I always find myself saying. If you're pro-black, it doesn't mean you're anti-white. If you're pro-woman, it doesn't mean you're anti-male. So, but that's something that people misunderstand about what DEI is or means.
100%, and I think it's like these institutional narratives that can get in the way of that, and I also think that it's people that don't fully understand or are taking one little thing and running with it like social media tends to do versus really owning it and understanding it.
It's also taking things apart. So DEI to me, a lot of people just sounds like affirmative action. And when you say that word, there's a lot of problems with that word.
Yeah.
And so affirmative action, so DEI, there's another misconception, DEI only benefits certain groups, right? But they're really more so there to help people learn about each other. Just a quote of United States Department of Labor study in 2011, they provided evidence to show that actually white women were the primary beneficiaries of affirmative action programs. So, so when you think about, who's benefiting, so when you look at the research, sometimes you look at a different story. Another is DEI.
Well, and I also think that it's not necessarily about who's better. It's how can we learn from each other's differences to create inclusive environments, like that. It's not about becoming divisive or separating people. It's about bringing people together. It's about, having that empathy and understanding of others and where they're coming from and where they came from.
And getting an accurate picture of what has actually happened so that you can actually deal with what you're working with or what the problems are that you're currently facing. There's the DEI and critical race theory, right? CRT, DEI, they're the same thing, which they, of course, are not. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the idea is really to talk about culture, to acknowledge the differences, embrace and support people from all different backgrounds. That's really what DEI is. CRT is something very specific. It really has to do with the history of racial bias, in particular with social and legal institutions. So it's not really about people in the broad sense of the word. I just want to go through. So that's another misconception. DEI is the initiatives are divisive, but they're not divisive. Again, when you're dealing with this content, it can be complicated. And if you haven't really looked clearly at what's going on, it can seem to be that I taught a class, I taught a lesson in a social studies class. It was about feminism and art, right? So. And
you love that class. You had fun with that.
And I've often told the students up front is, the teacher, she's a white woman, I'm a black man, but so we're not the same, we're not equal, and that's not the point. The point is that we have experiences where we're related to one another, and so it's really the relatedness that is really
Mhm.
what we want to get at, and understand how, what the relationships are, what the history has been. Or that there's another misconception with DEI that hiring diverse candidates is enough to check the box, right? I was recently talking with, I had a meeting with a group of, went to go hang out with some friends, and turned out there were like about 7 teachers there. And I was like, okay, well, since we're all teachers, can I ask a question? A question about DEI and what their experience and understanding of it was. And one of the guys there told me that, he was watching over the course of 10 years, them hire, as he said, people of color to come in to do the work, and then them leaving after 2 or 3 years, really, because feeling like they weren't getting the support they needed. So you bring people in to do the work, and then but they're not, the environment or the institution doesn't really understand what the work is,
Correct.
and that's again, organizations are sometimes reluctant to admit that there's a need for this, sometimes it's, the issues like unconscious bias, lack of role models, communication barriers, people not understanding cultural differences, a lack of training. That's huge, right?
Very huge.
And fear of the unknown. People don't know where this is going and what it leads to, So all those things are in the way.
Yeah. And really, when we're talking about DEI in education, it's really an extension of differentiated instruction, right? How do you reach a broader spectrum of learners? How do you meet students where they are? If we don't know what they're bringing into our classrooms, how can we meet the needs and their needs there? Because everybody's bringing baggage in. There is no like closet at the entrance to the school for everybody to drop their baggage from, the outside world.
Mhm.
And you go into this utopia that doesn't bring any of that in. That's not the purpose of public education, right? And so I think that's really important to understand.
Yeah. So in public education, you have a variety of different styles of learners.
Yeah.
If you teach for like longer than 5 minutes, you'll realize that you're gonna have to talk differently to different kids in order to find out where they are and what they need and how to speak to them. So diversity in education is the same sort of thing. People come from different backgrounds, and you need to speak to that or have some understanding of it. I have a class where I have kindergarten class where I have 15 students. 7 of them are primarily Spanish speaking. So I'm working on my Spanish in class to get them, because it's just an example of needing to extend to where the students are at to bring them forward. So if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you're probably not in the category of having some of those misconceptions about DEI, but I want to list them, because what we really want to talk about is the two people we interviewed.
Right.
And
Yeah,
what-
we're not trying to make a case for DEI today. We just want to look at, we want to set it up with some misconceptions and then look at 2 people who are doing this work and try to understand what motivates them to do it, because they do come from different paths, but there are similarities.
Mhm. So the first was Sanaz who has worked with NJPAC for 16 years. And she's currently focused on culturally responsive educational initiatives. But a lot of the work that she did was really outreach and connection to young people and young audiences. And the thing that she said that really hit me in the heart, man, was when she said, what we do with young people matters. And when she said it, I felt it. It was like,
Yeah.
it was because it was coming from her own personal experience. So we were asking, as a kid, what were the things that you connect to in art, and how did you connect to the arts as a young person? She talked about her being with her mother, and her mother singing songs or reciting poems in Farsi, because she's from Iran, and this is the language she grew up with. And so she was lucky enough that when she had an elementary school teacher, the teacher played guitar and sang songs, right? And so that connection between her mother and being in this school where music and songs were safe, and was great. So she talked about the importance of creating safe spaces for kids, right? And the fact that the arts are organically able to connect us despite our differences. She also mentioned working with theater and being a stage manager and how powerful that was. She said her mom would drop her off at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then she'd be there until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Her mom was like, "What are you doing?" And her mother finally came to a performance, and she saw her daughter, running the stage, organizing, coordinating people. She was like, "Oh, now I see what you're doing. Now I understand the value of that."
But that goes back to that you have to take the moment to get to know the student, right? That her mother took that moment, didn't get it until she really was open to seeing what she was doing. And then she went, oh, okay, now I understand. And that's what we need to do with our students. We need to be willing to kind of dig in and get to know who they are and more about them so we can give them more what they need.
Right. She talked about the importance of creating opportunities where young people can experience validation, and that was really, really important. So, because she credits, those experiences of her in school with helping her to really learn English, helping her to feel like there was something I can do. She can excel in school, becoming a Phi Beta Kappa Honors Society student. But the importance of a sense of accomplishment. This is I'm good at this, and then that becomes a very important part of her identity. It was the same thing with my daughter. My daughter was like, she was an artist. She became known as that artist girl. And that was really important, part of her feeling like, I am somebody. I have this thing I do.
And she's an incredible artist. I will state that.
So
for you. Proud Papa, but I'll say it.
Okay. That'd be embarrassing. So the other thing that Sanaz talked about that I really appreciated, which she mentioned, providing high quality experiences for the young people that offer them experiences where they can explore who they might want to become or what they might want to do, and to be celebrated for that. And I think about an earlier recording we did with Jed Dearyberry. That was really huge with him, the importance of celebrating the creativity.
Absolutely.
And really
and offering them those high quality experiences. If kids aren't exposed to high quality things, whether it's a performance or whether it's seeing artwork or whether it's going to a gallery or whether it's going to see a theater production or whether it's having a teaching artist come in, or us providing that as educators, they don't know what's possible out there, right? So, and not every kid has the means at home to have their parents take them to have these experiences. So that's the role of our schools, is to try to create more equity for our students, because those experiences, they deserve to have them, regardless of their parents' financial means or whatever it might be that may hinder their access.
Right. She also talked about professional development for arts educators, right? Because the term she used was unicorns. And if you're an arts teacher, that's the case. When the district gets together and the art teachers get together, your group is always smaller. And it often feels like you're working alone, or so when you have arts educators that come together, it helps you to first of all to understand you're not alone. Gives you opportunity to talk about other approaches and other concepts and ways to learn, and other ways to connect to each other. I think about Trevor Bryan, again, another interview we had that's coming up. He said it took him 10 years to develop the terminology and the critical framing in order for him to do the work he's doing. He had
Absolutely
to do. But again, he had to develop a way of talking to other people and a way of sharing that.
And that came from getting to know them, finding out what they needed and how he could help provide that for not only for teachers, not just students, but for teachers, right? So it's that piece of getting to know people and what they need, that differentiated instruction that occurs I kind of coined the term differentiated collaboration, right? When we're working with other teachers and how we have to approach that differently.
Right, and that's kind of where she's at now. So Sanaz talked about her focus now is more on an institutional shift, right? She says she misses working with the kids, but it's the logical next step is to take it to the next level. So lining larger organizational levels and looking for allies outside of the arts and other advocates. Second, the other interview was Julian Gomez, and he founded a group called Idea Cultural, an arts organization that focuses on outreach to young people and connections to the community. He also works with DEI programs and initiatives at different community colleges. And so we talked about him. He asked again, what was your background? He said he come from a family of artists. A lot of people played instruments and sang, recited poetry, listened to music together, but not as professional performers. But it was kind of natural, just part of the community and part of the culture. And so that's kind of where he understood the way that arts connect people. The best part of his story, though, is the fact that he's like the 16-year-old kid who leaves Colombia, comes to the U.S. by himself.
By himself was unbelievable.
Lives with his uncle, eventually starts going to high school, starting to learn English. After school, he starts working at a deli, and he has this guidance counselor. I think this is really important. This guy comes and finds him and pushes him through the process of registering for school. He said he went there twice, right? And he wasn't able to figure it out. He couldn't, and so this guidance counselor, took him through the process. He eventually starts, he studies English. And then he becomes interested in school paper. He studies journalism and photography. And so that was his road in. So here you have this kid coming from another country, another culture. Everything is there. He's a smart kid. He loves the arts. He wants to write. He wants to.
But he needed to find that connection.
Yes.
And that's what it is. Like he checks in with students that he connects to because he knows just like he was, they might be one day away from walking off campus and never coming back. And we've had students like that where they're one day away from, whatever it is. We've had students that we came and we're like, wait, they're gone. Where did they go?
Yes.
And, because when Edric and I were working together, the kids didn't have a choice. They were so little in Little Land that, their parents just whisked them off to another state and you never saw them again. And that's hard sometimes because we make these connections with students and we are vested in them. And then all of a sudden they can be gone,
Yeah, so I think that understanding of how important the time is, I've heard people talk about in middle school that by the time you get to like 6th or 7th grade, they can see some kids, the lights are starting to go off already. They've already decided what they can and can't do, right? I'm not smart. I don't.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And so just the importance of understanding those moments of where you got to find somebody where they're at and try to pull them through.
And we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to education and culture, right? Because that prohibits some people from experiencing the benefits that our educational institutions could offer. I'm not saying are offering, but could offer, because we are a hub we're like an ecosystem, right? Educational systems are like ecosystems. There's all kinds of different, subjects that are taught, and there's different people, and we need all of that to make it function well.
And we have to understand that students might or might not be able to figure out a way to get the benefits of what that is. So we have to plug them in. The other thing he said that was important was, what can we agree on? Where can we find it? He made a joke about this trip that he took with somebody, and he said, we're not going to talk about these 3 things.
Yeah.
And they had a great trip and a great conversation because they didn't, let's talk about the stuff we agree upon. And so the idea is, can we agree upon that we need to figure out where people are in their journey and then try to take them to the next step, And then can we look at people at the periphery, like because of language, economics, physical disabilities, mental health, can we find those people and figure out a way to plug them in and connect them? And you need, and the work that he's doing, the work Sanaz is doing, you have to identify those issues and you have to figure out and generate pathways for that particular population, right? Because they have the ability, but they might be restricted by the conditions that, other people are not affected by.
Well, and sometimes they're affected by not being exposed, not getting access to things that everyone else has access to because somebody decided it might not work. And I always believe that let them try anything. You can always move on to something else, but you have to give them that exposure.
And so, in terms of going up against that the conversation about people resisting DEI for one reason or another, there it is.
I hit the mic, Edric did not.
So
it's bound to happen.
So going up against that conversation of the resistance to DEI, his thing is, he said he approaches it from a viewpoint of self-discovery, right, and self-reflection. What are we doing? What is there to be learned? What do we need to pay attention to provide greater access? And then he said, and I think this is really important, it's not about policing bias.
No.
You're not there to it's not a gotcha kind of situation. You're not there to force anything on anybody. It's like, can we just be more conscious and do what we do better? And that's really what DEI is. It's really an outreach to other people. It's not a critique of what's been how people have failed. It's like, can we broaden the exposure? Can we broaden the outreach?
Right. Where do we find connections and how do we curate for a specific community and how do we invite people to participate? How do we make people feel welcome in our programs?
And at the end of it,
important part.
And that one quote again that he said that really, like I said, hit me was that you have to be persistent and you have to think long term. Because we were asking, well, what kinds of things do you really want to impart to students? And that was it. You got to be persistent. You got to get in there and fight it, and then you got to think long term. Like where do you want to wind up?
Yep. All right, everybody. Well, we hope you enjoyed our kind of synopsis and bringing it together and driving home a few points today. And we will see you in our next episode.
Thank you. See you, Lou.